In none of those did they manipulate the stock effect in any way. And then supposedly in these videos, the debunkers have claimed that they have manipulated the color, reshaped it, resized it, adjusted various contrasts, etc. And that to me doesn't make any sense regarding how visual effects works. But I think it's the situation where people just have such a hard time believing that something like this could be possible that they're willing to believe any alternative explanation that doesn't have to kind of make them reevaluate their worldview. Now, the other big debunk that's out there is this cloud picture. So people have argued that this cloud picture has the clouds in it that match the satellite video, and that this proves that it must be fake in general. Now, the problem with this is that even before that cloud picture showed up, we already proved that the clouds were moving and evolving. Each frame of reference in the satellite video is only a few seconds long, so the clouds aren't moving significantly, but they're moving a little bit. They kind of evolve. You can see the edges kind of grow or shorten. We can see the first orb puncture a hole through one of the clouds. But the most important aspect that rules out a cloud picture is that when the zap happens in the satellite video, it actually accurately illuminates the clouds in 3 dimensions in the foreground and in the background. For this type of accurate illumination, you would have to build a full 3D rendered environment. You cannot use a 2D visual effect for that. So whether or not I'm just presenting the evidence for people that can come up with their own opinions on it, and later as well, I'll present the strongest evidence for why the videos are authentic. But I just want people to understand that, yes, there are some debunk attempts out there. I've refuted all of them. And then what I think happened to the plane is I think that this was an espionage event where the United States government was set up potentially the batteries to burn. They might have even detonated them at the specific location, knowing that they do have a predictable burn rate, that it's not going to take down the airplane right away, to cause a diversion of the airplane to go from the South China Sea at the location where Mike McKay sees a plane on fire from the oil rig. 9 witnesses along the coast hear loud noises the same moment Mike McKay sees the plane on fire when it first goes dark. I think that battery could have damaged the electronics bay and caused it to go dark. I also think the operatives on board the plane, those Iranians, could have been related to the United States military or covert operation. They could have been involved in some type of pseudo hijacking event. And the plane turns around 10 minutes later when it's turning towards Penang, the location where the pilot would go to in an emergency event. You have another B777 pilot that hears communication from the plane. Supposedly there was also a tango call reported by Florence DeChangi that would indicate like a hijacking event that may have happened. And there's 8 fishermen at the same time, 10 minutes later, that see the plane flying unusually low. 8 different fishermen off the coast of Thailand and Malaysia. And this would be consistent with the idea that there was a fire and the pilot was depressurizing the plane, but not to asphyxiate the passengers, instead to give them enough oxygen, because the fire suppression devices take the oxygen out of the plane. So you need to depressurize the plane to get more oxygen into the plane and fly low enough so that there's enough oxygen for people to be able to breathe. Because I don't know if people know this, but the passenger oxygen mask only lasts for about 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most. So the plane is most likely being diverted to the rendezvous location where the assets would be prepared to perform what we see in the MH-370 videos in the Nicobar Islands. I think you could also argue, like some have said, Dan Hanley as well as Field McConnell, that to have an MQ-1C Gray Eagle, you can see the body of the drone, and we can tell this is either an MQ-1C Gray Eagle or an MQ-9 Reaper. MQ-1C Gray Eagle has images that you can find in Google image search that shows aerial surveillance cameras underneath the wings, and that's the same perspective that we see in the video. We can see this in a blue hue, or a rainbow palette, as it's being called. So it's more of like a traditional thermal view, slightly different than what we've seen from those forward-looking infrared cameras. This is a software setting in the Raytheon cameras that is available, and this may be the default settings as opposed to the black and white that we've seen from the DoD Navy videos that were declassified in 2017. Now we're watching a Boeing 777-200 that's an exact overlay of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, which indicates that we are actually looking at Malaysian Airlines in the video. And we see it making a hard left turn. We see it descending in the videos. We can tell that we are looking at cumulus clouds. These cumulus clouds only form at low altitudes. We checked the weather pattern for that day, and within 15 minutes of when we think these videos happen, the weather actually had low altitude cumulus clouds in the Nicobar Islands as well. The plane is actually maxing out the capabilities of a 777-200 wall and descent, wall turning at roughly 150 to 250 miles per hour. This would be very difficult to fake. In fact, there was somebody who posted on social media claiming to be a VFX artist from the movie Top Gun Maverick that said that scaling down planes like this and getting it to be accurate to the capabilities of the plane is some of the hardest things to pull off. Now, what we see, both videos actually are in perfect synchronization. We have a satellite video looking from one angle, and then we have a drone video looking horizontally from a completely different angle from the opposite side. And in the drone video, we can see these orbs begin to circle around the plane. In the satellite video, we see these orbs coming in at roughly 2,000 miles per hour, Mach 2, Mach 3 speeds we've estimated based on comparing pixels in them. And in both videos, these orbs are defying gravity as we know it. They're floating freely, they're not falling to the ground. But in the drone video, we see some very unusual details. We can see in the drone video that there's a black line. It looks like it's behind the orbs, but it's actually in front of the orbs, pulling them forward like they're running on train tracks. So there seems to be two different anti-gravitational effects at play here. The orbs themselves are displaced from gravity. We can see what's called a non-radiating barrier, which means it's like a field around the orb. It actually looks like these are more of like ball lightning as opposed to something like a traditional flying saucer that we might expect in UFOlogy. They form a pattern around the plane that when we mapped it out, it actually is a spherical pattern mapping in the plane, rotating around in a perfect 120-degree sinusoidal pattern, which seems to have some sort of purpose, which after we see the zap becomes a lot more apparent. It's like it's mapping the plane to figure out the dimensions of it. The orbs have a heat signature in them. And you can see there's very clear heat signature in the orbs, which is a very unusual detail to add. Engineer who works in low energy nuclear reactions, Bob Grenier, has looked at this and said that this is consistent with the topological monopole. Topological monopole is the idea of having a single magnetic effect, either a north or south, but not having a dipole effect. And this is potentially what might be needed in order to achieve anti-gravity, along with stuff like room temperature superconductivity. In the drone video, some of the strongest evidence for why this video is real is that we see it manually tracking the plane. So they're not using automatic tracking. There's a little bit of a delay consistent with somebody very far away using that camera to follow the plane and try to track it. They zoom in. There's shake in the drone video, which is, as they zoom in, increases accurately, just like if you're using your camera to zoom in on something. There's a 3D dynamic parallax. So when they zoom in, you can actually see the clouds, you can see the edges of the clouds more. So you can actually see that this is a full 3D rendered environment if it was faked. It can't be just a picture. We also see that line in front of the orbs is what we refer to as a geodesic. You can imagine it like the orbs are creating space in front of them to run down, like, as I mentioned, those train tracks, almost like a gravity well in front of them. We believe, after talking to Salvatore Pais, who has some patents out there that are advanced technology patents, that this could be produced by a laser effect using a high frequency, some type of high frequency vibrational effect that can essentially break through the fabric of reality as we see it, to create this geodesic, kind of bending or opening up space in front of them. And then right before the zap, we see one of the strongest details is we see the orbs reorient. And they actually, in both videos, we see a synchronized event. In the drone video, we see the orbs reorient where the heat signature kind of disappears for a second and then comes back. And then the orbs seem to be in a very specific position. At the same time, in the satellite video, we see the orbs spinning rotation slow down a little bit. And then all of a sudden, the orbs converge on the plane. And Bob Grenier has argued when they're converging on the plane, they're amplifying their energy. And talking to Salvatore Pais, he said that we can amplify energy to such a degree that we can break through the Schwinger limit, which is what we need to be able to do to break through the permittivity of free space itself, to break through what we would see as our reality to the underlying framework of the universe itself. And then we see this cold, dark event open up and encapsulate the plane. And within 3 frames, a fraction of a second.
When you're starting out with your
In 3 frames, a fraction of a second, the plane goes from being there to not being there anymore. You can actually see the tail of the plane in 1 frame, the very first frame of the dark endothermic event opening up. You can still see it sticking out of the back. And it looks like the plane's been pulled backwards a little bit. Now, I talked to Dave Rossi, who is a DoD contractor and engineer himself, and he argued the idea that there might be a 4th orb because you have to have some direction, some steering wheel for this mechanism, and that there might be an entanglement effect where 3 orbs have been entangled to a 4th orb, and you can stretch them out any 2 different locations. And then when we see our event go off, now all of a sudden the plane goes from being over here with the 3 orbs to being over here where the 4th orb is, as some sort of steering wheel or direction of travel. And it might be getting pulled backwards. And this is speculative, of course, but if it were being pulled backwards, since the plane was going to the east, it would be getting pulled backwards somewhere over to the west, which is where the Maldives are. So this is, I think, the best, in my mind. And one additional detail that I forgot to mention is there's a heat signature in the belly of the plane as well that morphs accurately, at least what I would expect from heat potentially pouring out of the plane. And it's in the location where the AC exhaust ports are near the landing gear. And since we've speculated as a fire event, especially if the fire was in the forward cargo bays, the smoke would have been pouring through the air conditioning system in the airplane. And it would have been getting pumped out through those AC exhaust ports. And in this situation as well, we've got, the fire event that we speculated. We've got that Mayday call. We've got the video showing hot smoke coming out of the back of this plane as well. And then we've got our witness on the ground, Catherine T., who saw dark smoke. So to me, I think that this is a huge amount of evidence that if these videos aren't real, why do they tell a story of the plane that's matched by more evidence than anybody else's story to date, any expert or what have you? The only thing that we've had to rule out for these videos to be real and this event to be the true event of the plane is these satellite pings after the location in the Nicobar Islands. And if you look at those Inmarsat satellite pings, I've looked at the raw data myself, it amounts to 10 rows on an Excel spreadsheet. And the weirdest part is that if you look at everything up until the Nicobar Islands, from when the plane took off, it's hundreds of rows of data. And you get to that part, and it's just 10 rows of data for 5 hours.
What does that mean? So just a lack of pinging back to the satellites and therefore not entering into the spreadsheets then?
Well, this is where it gets very bizarre because I've interacted with pretty much all of the original experts, including several people in the independent group, Victor Ilanello, as well as Mike Exner, and they just keep telling me it's normal. But the story that they present makes no sense. They argue that the ACAR system was turned off at 1707 UTC, which is 13 minutes before the plane went dark. But then we have full data from 1707 all the way up to 1840 UTC. And then at 1840 UTC, which the next ping is 1941 UTC through 2313 UTC, again, about 5 hours, we just have 10 rows of data. And there's a pattern in that data. And they try to argue that something changed, but I can't figure out what that might be in terms of why there would be this difference here. In my mind, if the system was turned off at 1707, the discrepancies should begin at 1707. They shouldn't begin at 1840 UTC. We looked into the SATCOMs. All of the SATCOM systems that exist out there all have 0-day vulnerabilities and exploits. They're all easily hackable. In fact, you probably only have to change one value in these systems in order to get people to believe that a plane went in a different direction than it actually did. For example, to convince people that it went south instead of going to the west. But the strongest evidence why those pings are not true is that we found nothing in the location where those pings supposedly say that the plane went into the South Indian Ocean. We didn't find one piece of debris down there. We found no black boxes. We had no acoustic detections, no radar detections, no witnesses, despite the fact that it's on an active shipping route. And we had 19 family members of the victims claim that they could call the cell phones of the victims for up to 4 days after they went missing. One of them even proved it on television. Phones are not, you cannot connect to a phone that is turned off, that's in the middle of the ocean away from cell towers, that is underwater, that is dead. And CNN had these experts come on and say that, oh no, this can happen, which I would believe if it was just one or two. When you have 19 families saying that, something does not add up.
So they're able to call their family members' phones.
What?
They were able to call their family members' phones, and they were ringing and they picked up voicemail or something like that?
The part about getting to the voicemail, I'm not sure about, but they rang. And if I were to turn my phone off and say, hey, Clayton, give me a call, it's not going to ring. It's going to go directly to the voicemail as opposed to ringing. I think the counter arguments have been that, oh, well, it could be an international call and could ring once or twice, which again, I could believe it if it was just one or two, but when you've got 19 families saying that, and they're saying it goes up to 4 days, they could do that, which is pretty consistent with how long maybe a phone would last if, you know, the battery on it. That's where I become pretty skeptical in general. So, yeah.
Wow. So these videos, I want to just go back to these videos, which have caused so much controversy. When did these videos emerge? We have the satellite video, and then we have this drone video. Where do these come from?
Yeah.
And how were you able to sync? How are we able to sync them up to know that it's perhaps the same object here, so we can use the exact same framing to know that this is the angle, this is the time signature, and we keep it consistent?
Yeah. And this is the story of, I guess, my emergence on the social media. I never expected to be anybody in this world or anybody special, and I still don't think that I am. But I remember seeing the drone video back in 2014 when I was first just curious about the plane, and I just dismissed it. I didn't know what I was even looking at. Just thought, oh, this is just some weird thing. And then back in August, these videos reemerged on the social media site Reddit, actually on the subreddit called UFOs. And I saw that video and I just went, huh, okay, that's interesting. And I saw the second video, which was the satellite video. And then I went, wait a minute. I remember seeing that drone video. And now you're telling me there's a second video in perfect synchronization. So I started digging into them. And so did many people on social media, and found that, yes, these actually date back to 2014. I mean, I remember seeing them in 2014 as well, but we've got the Wayback Machine. We know that the original account uploader was somebody called Regicide Anon, which technically stands for King Killer, Anonymous King Killer. And that the satellite video, which is the first one, says received March 12th, 2014 in the description, which is 4 days after the plane went missing.
4 days. 4 days after.
And it was
the plane
uploaded
disappears.
published May 19th, 2014, which is roughly 8 or 9 weeks after the plane disappeared. So we have a time frame of between 4 days and 72 days. Now, the interesting part is, remember those coordinates I just mentioned? Those coordinates are indicated by those Inmarsat pings as being potentially the real location of where the plane actually was in the Nicobar Islands. Now, the problem here is that the raw telemetry data was not made publicly available until May 28th, 2014 in a 47-page report. Before that, there was just a graph. Even Mike Exner of the Independent Group didn't know that the satellite information could even be real until June of 2014. So how did a supposed hoaxer know exactly where to put the plane with the real locations of the plane and the coordinates over a week before the raw telemetry data was even made publicly available? For people that
And that's on the screen, and they can see that on the screen.
Yes, in the bottom left of the satellite video, you can see it in the high definition version. So we also even went ahead and we looked at all the satellites. We actually found there's a low Earth orbit satellite pair, USA 229, a naval ocean surveillance satellite pair that was in the right location in the Straits of Malacca that could have been staring right down at this location around 1840 UTC. And this could have been in the constellation of the Sibir system. In fact, the Regicide Anon version is a stereoscopic version. It's two different videos two different videos side by side, slightly different angles. Now, debunkers have argued that YouTube had a capability to turn videos into 3D like that, which maybe they did. But if this is actually the original version and how this was leaked out to the public, then those two satellites right next to each other staring down would have been the ones that are sending the data to the Sibir system to be able to build this capability that we see to track the plane in general. The second video, the MQ-1C Gray Eagle video, was it says received June 5th, 2014 in the description, uploaded June 12th, 2014. So right away, you can start to realize that, okay, this first video came out, and then a couple weeks later, the next video gets published. So now you're starting to build this narrative of, okay, wait a minute, like, how did these videos come out? Who potentially could have leaked them? What were they trying to accomplish in leaking them? And if you think that these videos are fake, then the prime suspect should be Regicide Anon themselves. Because if Regicide Anon was not the faker of these videos, why would they put this received March 12th, 2014 in the description of the satellite video? Because 4 days is not enough to come up with a whole plan. 4 days after this plane went missing, we were still looking at the South China Sea. So there's no way the 4 days after is pretty much, a nail in the coffin. These would have to be real. And the problem is that if somebody did fake these, in my mind, it could only be some type of state-sponsored event. It requires far too much intricate detail, stuff that was not publicly available, like the heat signatures and the orbs and the monopole stuff was not even publicly available till an Alto University paper after this plane went missing. Far too many details in this for this to be just some kind of rogue person that created them.
So a couple of questions come to mind here. Why create a fire event if you have this incredible technology with an orb technology that can create spherical wraparound of the craft in order to make it disappear? Why the diversion? Was that part of the cover up, or?
Okay, check this out.